Cleveland Cavaliers player Kevin Porter Jr. is out of jail tonight after he was arrested early this morning in Mahoney.
That they intend to trade or waive 2019 first-round pick Kevin Porter Jr. That Porter reportedly got into a screaming match with Cavs brass.
Sad, you know, because obviously you're starting to see continuous incidents.
The Rockets acquired Kevin Porter Jr. For a heavily protected future second-round pick, sources told ESPN.
And they said, hey, you go out there to the G League and play just like James Harden. Oh, Porter with a no-look pass over the back of his head. He's trying to add to it. He steps back, keeps firing away, and he hits again. Unbelievable performance tonight. There it is. 50 points for Kevin Porter Jr.
Seattle, Washington, a place that many of this generation's best hoopers have called home. From Jamal Crawford and Nate Robinson to Isaiah Thomas and Zach LaVine, the Emerald City and surrounding areas have produced some top basketball talent over the past couple decades. But headlining the newest generation of Pacific Northwest ball players is a guy whose life was changed forever on the same streets that he calls home.
It was a fight. He was trying to break it up, and in the mix of him trying to break it up, he got shot multiple times. That night, I just told him that their dad wasn't coming home. I didn't want to believe it. I still was like, he's gonna come home.
She never really told me, but I could see it. I could see it. Everybody in Seattle was hurt because my dad was known by a lot of people.
At a young age, Kevin Porter Jr. learned one of the hardest lessons in life, and the result would be a burning motivation to get himself and his family out of the neighborhood that had taken his father. As word began to spread about KPJ's talent on the court, crowds would pack into middle school gyms just to get a glimpse at what many were calling Seattle's next top player. By the time he was old enough to play varsity in high school, Porter negotiated with his mom to let him transfer to Rainier Beach High School, a top local basketball program that had been home to many of Seattle's local legends, and happened to be the same school where his father had been a three-sport athlete in the 90s. Now honoring his legacy, KPJ quickly established himself as not only the top player in the city, but one of the nation's top high school prospects. As a 6'6" combo guard, he could create mismatches all over the court thanks to his handles, and was always a threat to pull up from deep. In his senior year, he averaged 27 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 assists, being named Mr. Washington Basketball and becoming the only 5-star recruit from Seattle in his class. Schools across the country were lining up to talk to the talented guard, who had shown flashes of athleticism and an ability to create shots that made him a potential star. After receiving offers from top West Coast programs like UCLA and Oregon, Porter decided to go with the University of Southern California to continue his career. From the time he was old enough to dribble, his dad had put a basketball in his hand, and now that same ball would be Porter Jr.'s ticket to his dreams. As the first 5-star basketball recruit to step into USC's program since DeMar DeRozan in 2008, expectations were high for Kevin Porter Jr. and the rest of the Trojans' highly touted recruiting class coming into the 2018 season. He would get off to a hot start, averaging 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists through the first 5 games. But after suffering a quad contusion during a late November contest, KPJ would be sidelined for over a month and a half with the lingering injury. He returned to the team in mid-January, but 3 days later another setback would derail his already dysfunctional freshman season. On January 13th, it was announced by the team that Porter had been suspended indefinitely from the program for undisclosed personal conduct issues. While Kevin Porter would come out and publicly state that he wouldn't be leaving his team without finishing the season, the tension was already starting to build between the two sides. KPJ would be reinstated 2 weeks later and go on to play in the final 14 games of the season, capped off by a 17-point outing against his home state Washington Huskies. After averaging 9.8 points and 4 rebounds in 22 games, an underwhelming stat line considering the expectations coming into the season, Porter had still been able to show flashes of the skill set that had made him a top player in the country. Between step-back jumpers from 3 and quick moves to get past his defender and finish around the rim, along with a growing potential as a playmaker, KPJ found himself getting comparisons to top scorers like James Harden at the next level, and despite questions surrounding his character off the court, elected to declare for the 2019 NBA Draft at the end of the season. Working out at top facilities like the Kobe Bryant-endorsed Mamba Sports Academy and connecting with professional skills trainer Chris Brickley, who had famously worked with some of the top talent across the league, Kevin Porter Jr.'s preparation leading into the draft was simple. Improve as an on-ball scorer and prove the doubters wrong by any means necessary. As draft night 2019 finally rolled around, KPJ found himself being one of the biggest mysteries of the draft. Would a team take a chance on his potential and draft him in the lottery, or would his off-court concerns from USC cause him to drop into the second round? It wouldn't take long for all questions to be answered, as the Milwaukee Bucks selected Kevin Porter Jr. with the 30th pick in the first round, before sending him to the rebuilding Cleveland Cavaliers in a trade.
What were your emotions when you heard Commissioner Silver call your name?
It was a relief. I always wanted to be in the NBA, and hearing my name called was the greatest moment that I've ever experienced.
You've spoken at length about playing and honoring your father. What do you think this would mean to him now in this moment?
I know he's smiling.
Just like that, Porter found himself paired alongside young guards Colin Sexton and fellow class member Darius Garland in a loaded backcourt in Cleveland. Despite the struggles of growing up in his neighborhood outside of Seattle and a rocky stint at USC, KPJ had officially made it to basketball's highest level. Kevin Porter Jr. would make his debut with the Cavaliers on October 23, 2019, but found himself fighting for minutes early on in the season. The result was an underwhelming start, highlighted by an 18-point outing in his first career start on November 18th. KPJ wouldn't begin to find his footing in the league until the month of December, where an uptick in time on the court gave him the opportunity to showcase exactly why Cleveland had traded for him in the first round. Between a 24-point outburst against James Harden and the Rockets and a season-high 30-point and 8-rebound performance versus Miami, Porter would string together a strong final 2 months of his rookie year, where he averaged 12.5 points, 3.1 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. However, despite this promising showcase to end the season, there were still a ton of questions left to be answered regarding where KPJ fit in the NBA, and an incident in the offseason would introduce the latest roadblock he would have to overcome.
Cleveland Cavaliers player Kevin Porter Jr. is out of jail tonight after he was arrested early this morning in Mahoney County. Troopers were called to I-76 around 2 this morning for a rollover crash. They say Porter lost control because he was tired, and they do not believe that he was impaired by drugs or alcohol. However, they say they found a gun and marijuana inside the car. He was arrested on charges of improperly handling a firearm and possession of marijuana.
The off-season weapons charge would keep Porter sidelined for the entire beginning of the 2020-21 season, something that alone would normally have been enough to cause a franchise to move on from a player with a growing track record of off-court issues. But on January 18th, it was announced that an additional incident had been the final breaking point. Following a trade that brought in forward Taurean Prince from the Brooklyn Nets, the team had moved Kevin Porter Jr.'s locker without asking his permission or telling him they planned to do so. This resulted in a reported outburst from Porter that involved yelling at the general manager and head coach as well as loud remarks directed at various other people within the organization. Following this, Cleveland released a statement saying that if they could not trade Kevin Porter within the next few days, he would be released altogether. And just like that, it seemed like Porter's struggles off the court had finally caught up with him.
That's disrespectful.
The outburst was...
It's not an outburst, Ernie. No, that's disrespectful. I mean,
you can't do that.
I don't care if you're the first man, 12th man. You can't move my locker without calling me and be like, hey, we're going to move your stuff.
It's sad, you know, because obviously you're starting to see continuous incidents happen, and you hate to see that kind of spiral start to take place with a kid. It's unfortunate to see him in these circumstances. You hope that people around him can help him and galvanize him and get his career and his life back on the right track.
However, just as it seemed like Porter was going to be forced to fight his way out of free agency, the Houston Rockets, who had now found themselves rebuilding after star James Harden had forced his way out via trade to the Brooklyn Nets, traded for KPJ just 3 days after the incident. Now, having not played a single game for Cleveland in the 2021 season, Porter would be on his way to a new team in just his second year. Houston provided something that Kevin Porter Jr. desperately needed: a change of scenery. Although he would immediately be assigned to the franchise G League team, the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, it wouldn't take long before KPJ would prove that he belonged on the main roster. Just a week after his debut, he'd record a 27-point triple-double, the first by any player in the league all season. In 15 games with the Vipers, he led the entire G League in points, averaging 24 a night with 7.2 assists and 6.5 rebounds, torching opposing defenses and putting together well-rounded performances. It was obvious that Porter had been in the gym during his time off the court, showcasing a polished skill set on the court and an increased focus on making plays for teammates. His play earned him the respect of many members of the organization, including the front office, who soon elected to move KPJ up to the main roster for the rest of the season. With the Rockets playing with a young roster that had been depleted even more due to injuries throughout the season, the coaching staff was willing to let talent develop, and Porter was given the final 2 months of the season to prove his worth to the franchise, an opportunity he wasn't about to let go by. KPJ took the court in Houston with a new fire that had been absent in Cleveland, being given increased minutes by the coaching staff, including a starting spot in the rotation for a majority of the remaining games. He would drop a then season-high 27 points along with 8 assists in just his second game, and continued to put up consistent numbers throughout the rest of the season. The franchise and fans in H-Town fell in love with the fire that Porter plays with, embracing him as their own, a bond that both parties needed. With Houston looking for a new identity following the exit of the longtime face of their franchise, and KPJ needing a team to believe in him and surround him with an environment to succeed.
This organization, saved my life potentially, so definitely a big fresh air. And I just love being here, and I want to be here for a while. So.
Why do you say saved your life?
I needed a new scenery where I was at, and they picked me up when I was down.
As the season rolled on, Porter would continue to show his growth both on and off the court, providing a level-headed approach and putting up consistent all-around numbers, including a few double-digit assist nights as the Rockets coaching staff experimented with playing him at point guard. On April 29, 2021, Kevin Porter Jr. would secure his spot in the franchise and the NBA once and for all. Matching up with the eventual NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks, the game got off to a steady start for KPJ as he dropped in a step-back three and got an easy transition bucket within the first 3 minutes of the game. But as the night went on, it was clear that Porter was playing more aggressively, as he was hunting for shots and going right at one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, Jrue Holiday. In between shot attempts, KPJ was also actively hunting for teammates, dominating possession after possession with advanced reads, and making the defense pay for giving him looks on offense. As the Rockets' primary ball handler, Porter had the freedom to take advantage of mismatches every time down the court, and had compiled an 18.7 assist stat line by halftime. As the second half rolled around, it was more of the same, with every bucket leading to a growing confidence for KPJ. As Jrue Holiday tried to tighten his defense, there wasn't anything anyone in the gym could do, with Porter continuing to create space and knock down difficult shots, while also getting loose in transition to convert tough and one buckets. As the final buzzer sounded, not only had the Rockets came across a rare win against a good team, but KPJ had been able to put together an all-time great performance, dropping 50 points and 11 assists, and becoming the youngest player in NBA history to have over 50 points and double-digit assists in a single game.
What was going through your mind when everything you put up was going in?
I mean, once a scorer get that rhythm, you just got to keep being aggressive, and they're gonna all fall. Once you see two go in, it's like the rim isn't there to shoot. So I felt good tonight. I needed this one. My team kept me confident after last time out. I had a rough one, but I came out here and gave it my all. We got the win.
After overcoming incredible odds to reach the NBA, and seemingly having his career on the brink of ending just 2 months prior, Kevin Porter Jr. had found himself in the middle of basketball history and firmly established himself at the game's highest level. There's no more doubt that Kevin Porter Jr. can become a star in the NBA. For Kevin himself and the people of Seattle, there was never a doubt to begin with. Thanks to Houston's trust in him and his play on the court, it's safe to say that he's found a home with the Rockets for the near future. The 2021 NBA Draft saw them bring in G League sensation and top prospect Jalen Green to pair alongside KPJ in the backcourt, meaning the franchise is all in on the young duo to eventually lead them back to the playoffs. And that's the #1 goal for Porter too, repaying the franchise that took a risk on him and helping lead them back to the top of the NBA. This offseason, KPJ's underdog mentality has taken on a life of its own, becoming a focal point of the entire roster and leading to a fan base in Houston that loves his game. It's not hard to understand how this could be contagious, especially when you see a guy who's been able to overcome the setbacks that Porter has and turn them into opportunities. As he continues to progress in his career, his story will only become more inspirational. A player who honors his late father every time he steps onto the court, now beating the odds and making a name for himself in the game they both loved.